Today I am going to talk on the growth of industries and role of private capital in India. Before independence, Indian textile industry was world famous. The muslin has its name in the whole world. The Britishers destroyed it and India was in the shambles when it gained its independence in 1947. After the independence, India has to devise its own industrial policies and policies of economic development. But what would have been the policy that was to be followed by India? India then harped into a policy of import substitution industrialization. That means, India wanted to grow industries internally and it did not want to allow the foreign companies and the foreign investors to come and do business in India and set up in industries in India. So as to give space to the Indian entrepreneurs to develop and develop their business, and also it was not the it will be not very easy to say that the Indian entrepreneurs had a very huge opportunity at the beginning, because it was the state capitalism, it was the state who was the main pioneer of industrialization in India. And India, so after its independence in the very year of 1948, the first industrial policy resolution was published and it accepted the importance of both the private and public sector. But the division of the industrial sector was done into 4 categories. The industry where there was a state monopoly, certain industries were kept under the state monopoly, some were mixed sectors, some were of governmental control, and the last one was left for the private enterprises to usher. So, it also accepted the role of small and cottage industries which were the backbone of Indian villages, and Gandhiji was in his days, in his independence day struggle days, was very much consistent on his support to the small and cottage industries. But in the first 5-year plan, we saw that there was a preponderance of agriculture over industries, but in the 1956, it was a very important year for India's industrial growth, because in that year industrial policy resolution of 1956 was adopted and it classified the entire industrial sector into 3 schedules. The first one is Schedule A, that is the first category, the industries are included whose future development was the exclusive responsibility of the state, and 17 industries were included in this category. The very important arms and ammunition industry, allied items of defense equipment, atomic energy, iron and steel. We can see a number of iron and steel factories coming up after the declaration of 1956, a number of factories that came up, heavy castings and foregoing of iron and steel, and all were under the state enterprises, all were done by the state. In the Schedule B, there are those industries which were progressively state owned, but in which private entrepreneurs, private capital would be expected only to supplement the efforts of the state. Only 12 industries are included, and the rest of the industries, basically the other industries, the consumer industries were left to the private sector. Those are not the heavy industries. The heavy industries were kept in the state hands, because Nehru, he considered that those industries, the heavy industries, he actually told in a speech that the dams that were to be built, infrastructural items, those are the temples of modern India, and the heavy industry, without heavy industrialization India could not prosper, and it was the prerogative of the Indian state to develop the heavy industries for the overall economic development of the state. So, we can see that when the third annual plan growth rate, if we look at the growth rate 1961, after the 1956 plans, in 1961 the growth rate was quite okay, it took up shape of a plateau, but in the 1966 it plunged down. It is a very sluggish growth of industrial growth. So, in that backdrop, industrial policy of 1969 that was adopted, and the Monopolistic and Restrictive Trade Practices Act was passed, and that was done when Indira Gandhi was there. The firms with assets of 25 crore or more were put under the obligation of taking permission from the government of India before any expansion, greenfield venture and takeover of other firms. The government also set up an MRTP commission, that means the firms with the assets of 25 crore, they had to take the permission of the government to expand. This was basically putting up some kind of control on the private sector. Next industrial policy was declared in the year 1973, and highest priority to this generation was given to the power, and products to be reserved for small scale industries were identified. And it also underlined a closer interaction between the agricultural and industrial sectors. Again, the next industrial policy was declared in the year 1977, and in that year foreign investment in unnecessary areas were prohibited. Still India was backing a kind of dirigist mentality, that means that autarkic mentality, that means in the field of industries, that means it is very much protective, it is very careful, very cautious to open up the sector to private capital, because it thinks that if it is laid open to the private capital, then it may lead to some inequality and other social problems, and there will be problems of capitalism will engulf the Indian atmosphere, Indian society and all those things. So, with those things in mind, India did not walk into the way of liberalization at that time. In the Indian sector, industrial sector was not so liberal, but actually when what happened that in that year, in the years between 1966-65, the growth rate was not so satisfactory, and the Indian position was not so good, and also what was the demand for consumer industries was also failed, because the growth rate that was being high due to the growth of heavy industries now plunged to down. So, in that backdrop 1980, the year 1980, another industrial policy was declared, when the foreign investment via technology transfer route was allowed. MRTP limit that was previously 25 crore were now raised upward to 50 crore to promote setting up bigger companies. Industrial licensing was also simplified, and industrial policy resolution of next was industrial policy resolution of 1985 and 6. Foreign investment was further simplified. It was at the time of Rajiv Gandhi. At that time, there was a pressures on Indian government to liberate the Indian economy and come out of the dirigist regime. The dominant method of foreign investment remained as in the past, technology transfer, and now the equity holding of MNCs in the Indian subsidiaries could be 49%. MRTP limit was also revived upward to 100 crore. Compulsory licensing remained for 64 industries only. Industries based on imported raw materials also got a boost. But the thing is that we can see the trend that from 1950s to still now, till 1980s, 85, 86, the trend is that India followed a kind of protective economy, but gradually it was in its way to liberalization. And we will see in the next phase that how the 1991 was important for the growth of industrial revolution in industries in India. So, the question for this section is how many industries were listed under Schedule A in the industrial policy of 1956. It was in the year of 1991 that marked a significant departure from India's earlier industrious policies, and India now walked into the ways of liberalization, privatization and globalization. So, this is the year that marked the entry of private capital prominently in the India's industrial sector. So, what was the backdrop? Why did India resort to such emphatic measures? Why did it go for such drastic changes in its industrial policy? The thing was that it was in the year 1991 that Gulf War was going on, and the petrol prices, the prices of petroleum was increasingly going up, and it was too much for as India had to import a large amount of petroleum from abroad, from the Gulf countries. So, India's forex reserves were getting depleted, and India had to pay a hefty amount actually in dollars and foreign exchange to pay up its petroleum bill. So, the foreign exchange reserve was depleting very fast. Also, as the disturbances continued in the Gulf countries, there is a sharp decline in the private remittances from overseas Indian workers. inflation was peaking at a very high of 17% and fiscal deficit of central government was reaching 8.4%, as throughout the years the government funded growth was experienced in the Indian society. The forex exchange reserve made such a low that it was only available for 15 days, and so there was the balance of payment crisis in 1991, and in this backdrop India had no other way other than allowing the liberalization, privatization and globalization, and so simultaneously the new industrial policy of 1991 was declared. It was a significant departure, and the features of new industrial policy was de-reservation of industries, de-licensing of industries, abolition of the MRTP limit, promotion to foreign investment, FERA replaced by FEMA, and their compulsion of phased production abolished. So, what is de-reservation? So, de-reservation is number of, that is the sector, the industries that were reserved previously for the governmental sector were now open. It was now open, there was no reservation on the industries. Number of reserved industries was cut down to only 8 in 1991. At present, if we look at the present term, only 2 industries which are reserved for central government are atomic energy and nuclear research and the railways. Obviously, there are some sectors of railways are liberated, but the operation of railways is still with in the hands of the government. And another thing is the de-licensing of the industries. De-licensing, number of industries were put under compulsory provision of licensing, it was cut down to only 18. Now, at the present time only 5 industries carry the burden of compulsory licensing. So, there was a license raj prominent in the Indian economy that actually inhibited the growth of industries, because it was a very strenuous process. So, that licensing process was now done away with, and the only 5 industries that carry the burden of compulsory licensing as aerospace and defense related electronics, gunpowder, industrial explosives, detonating fuse, dangerous chemicals, tobacco, cigarette and related products, and alcoholic drinks. So, only 5 industries were now kept under licensing, and foreign investments were also welcomed in direct and indirect forms, because without foreign investments no country can prosper, and internal investments are not sufficient to devise or to pioneer the industrial development in India. Direct form of foreign investment was required. An indirect form of that is FDI required, and indirectly foreign investment was welcomed in the form of portfolio investment scheme, which formally commenced in the year 1994. Under the PIS scheme, foreign institutional investors are allowed to invest in Indian security or stock market. Now, FDI were allowed through 2 routes, that means one is automatic route and another is governmental route. Under the automatic route, the non-resident of Indian company does not require any approval from the government of India, and under the governmental route, the approval from government of India is required prior to the investment. Proposals for foreign investment under the government route are considered by the respective administrative ministry or department. Now, if we look at the figures of which industries are allowed and 100 for the government route and automatic route, there are a number of industries that have been allowed to have 100% FDI through automatic route, like automobiles, animal husbandry, agriculture. Also, we can see there are some other industries 100% FDI permitted under government route also. So, there are some industries like titanium bearing minerals, its value addition and integrated activities up to 100%, but only some sectors are prohibited to have foreign direct investment or FDI. Those are manufacturing of cigars, cigarettes, atomic energy, and obviously none other than the railway operation. So, we can see that there is a trend towards huge liberalization. The previous the protective regime was now done away with, and now we can see a number of private companies are being welcomed. So, privatization and disinvestment is also welcomed. For the purposes of privatization, government also has adopted the route of disinvestment, which involves the sale of public sector equity to the private sector and public at large. We can see that in the very recent instant how Air India was diluted and disinvested, and Tata Group was now the new owner of the Air India. While pursuing disinvestment, government has to retain the majority shareholding, that means at least 51%, and management control of the public sector undertakings that was at that time maintained. Current disinvestment policy says there is a Department of Investment and Public Asset Management, that is DIPAM, to identify the PSUs and suggest disinvestment in consultation with the respective ministries. So, strategic investment, that is selling of 50% or more shares of the PSUs, to be done through consultation among ministries, departments and Niti Aayog. A core group of secretaries on disinvestment to consider the recommendations of Niti Aayog to facilitate a decision by the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs and to supervise the implementation process. From this section, our question is, what do you understand by the word DIPAM? With the adoption of new industrial policies of 1991 and the liberalization policies, it was expected that India would now walk into the way of very robust growth and development in the industrial sector. It happened initially, but ultimately after a few years the growth rate also again slumped, because the international competition was there and the Indian companies, they were not able to compete with the international companies, and we can see some amount of slump in the growth, because again, but eventually it again recovered, and around 2007-8 it experienced a very high rate of growth in the it actually reached the double figures, in double digit the growth rate was touched double digits, and it was astonishing for the Indian economy. But again, after we see that in 2008 there was a global financial recession that hit the entire world, and India was also not an exception, though India was partly hit by that recession, as Indian economy was not so much integrated with the world economy even at that point of time, but still the bad effects of the recession reached the Indian shores quite badly, and again the India's growth rate slumped to a new lows again. But in the year 2014 there was a change of government, and the new government actually started to have roll out new plans for the India's industrial development, industrial growth and all over development. First one of them is the Make in India initiative announced by the new Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the year 2014. On September 25th, 2014, the Indian government announced the Make in India initiative to encourage manufacturing in India and galvanize the economy with dedicated investment in manufacturing and services. The aim was to flood the Indian market with Indian products and not the foreign products, and also help the Indian entrepreneurs, business and the capitalists to grow their own. It was aimed to increase the manufacturing sector's growth to 12 to 14% per annum in order to increase the sector's share in the economy. It also aims to create 100 million additional manufacturing jobs by 2022. It wanted to ensure that the manufacturing sector's contribution to GDP is increased to 25% by 2022 from the current levels of 15 and 16% at 2014. It is designed to facilitate investment, foster innovation, protect intellectual property and build the best in class manufacturing infrastructure to make India a global manufacturing hub. It was actually done to attract the foreign investors, the Indian companies to set up industries and also roll the wheels of development in India. India wanted to counter in this way also the China. The China was at that this time the global manufacturing hub. A number of companies are settled in China. So, it was also a counter to the Chinese entrepreneurship or Chinese enterprises, and also India wanted to establish its own sway in the global order or international politics. So, another policy that was rolled out by Indian government was the Startup India. The Startup India, it aimed for a prosperous India. What is a startup? Startup, that is the newer firms, that were new firms, new incentives were given for the startups, and it ensured that there will be no inspection for at the startup companies for 3 years, no income tax on profits for the first 3 years, and Startup India was a single point contact exemption from capital gains tax on personal property sold to invest in startup, 80% rebate on patent filing fee, 35 public private incubators, 31 innovation centers at National Institute and dedicated fund of 10,000 crore to promote startups were designed by the Government of India. Also a credit guarantee scheme or loans. These policies were made to attract the newer persons in the business, to those who were not in the businesses so long were attracted to do some business and hence up the ante of Indian economic ecosystem. So, this was very startling thing. This was a kind of new thing for India, where the Indian now will now move to the path of entrepreneurship. Now, India officially has 38,756 officially recognized startups with 27 unicorns, 8 of which received this status in 2020 and the third largest tech startup globally. It also helped not only the industrial sector, but also the services sector, specifically the technological and IT industry, information technology industry. If we consider that as an industry, though it is a service sector, it helped to boost up the service sector, that means the IT industry in India. Now, the sectors, gross manufacturing sectors, the gross value added at current prices are estimated at 348.53 million US dollars as per the second as advanced estimates of financial year 2021. As per the latest survey, the capacity utilization in India's manufacturing sector stood at a 66.6% in the third quarter of financial year 21. The manufacturing component of the IIP stood at 116.9 between April 2020 and March 2021. According to Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, the India's industrial output measured by the Index of Industrial Production stood at 143.4 in March 2021. Now, after 6-7 years passed, the Make in India program was announced. What are the achievements of this program? What did it achieve? With the help of Make in India program drive, India is now on a path of becoming the hub for high-tech manufacturing, as global giants like General Electric, Siemens, HTC, Toshiba and Boeing have either set up or are in the process of setting up manufacturing plants in India, attracted by India's market of more than a billion consumers and increasing purchasing power. In May 2020, the Government of India increased the FDI in defence manufacturing under the automatic route from 49% to further 74%. India has now become one of the most attractive destinations for investment in the manufacturing sector. Some of the major investment and developments in this sector in the recent past are by growth of Reliance Industries, the growth of Adani Industries. Adanis have increased their ports business and everywhere they have set their footprint. In financial year 2021, India received a total foreign direct investment inflow of US $81.72 billion, a 10% increase year on year. On February 16, 2021, Amazon India announced to start manufacturing electronic products in India, starting first with Amazon Fire TV stick manufacturing. The company also plans to start manufacturing with the contract manufacturer Cloud Network Technology, a subsidiary of Foxconn in Chennai, by the end of 2021. In April 2021, Godrej Appliances launched a range of made in India air conditioners. The company plans to invest another 100 crore in its manufacturing units to increase the AC production capacity to 8 lakh units by 2025. The Bharti Enterprises Limited and Dixon Technologies have formed a joint venture to take advantage of the government scheme for the manufacturing of telecom and networking products. Samsung Display Noida, which has invested 4,825 crores to move its mobile and IT display manufacturing plant from China to Uttar Pradesh, has received special incentives from the state government also. So, these things are huge, because the huge international companies, they are coming and setting up their plants in India due to the renewed business policies and industrial policies of the government. The government is now allowing the businesses to function smoothly and very easily, and they are getting the facilities to set up their industries. The government also approved a scheme with 18,000 crore for the production of advanced chemical cell batteries. This is expected to attract investments worth 45,000 crore in the country and further boost the capacity in core component technology and make India a clean energy global hub. In line with this, also JFE Steel Corporation in collaboration with JSW Steel Limited signed a MoU to evaluate a study to establish a grain oriented electrical steel sheet manufacturing and sales joint venture company in India. There are other companies too, they are excelling in India and they are willing to invest in India, set up their plants here. Also the mega investment textile parks scheme to build world class infrastructure will enable global industry champions to be created. The government has proposed to make significant investments in the construction of modern fishing harbors and fish landing centers covering 5 major fishing harbors in Kochi, Chennai, Visakhapatnam, Paradip and Petuaghat, along with a multi-purpose seafood park in Tamil Nadu. The Operation Green scheme of the Ministry of Food and Processing Industry, which was limited to onions, potatoes, tomatoes, has been expanded to 22 perishable products to encourage export from also the agricultural sector. But there are still a long road to travel. India is an attractive hub for foreign investments in the manufacturing sector. Several mobile phone, luxury and automobile brands among others have set up or either looking to establish their manufacturing bases in this country. The manufacturing sector of India has the potential to reach $1 trillion by 2025. The implementation of the goods and services tax will make India a common market with a GDP of $2.5 trillion along with a population of 1.32 billion people, which will be a big draw for the investors. With impetus on the developing industrial corridors and smart cities, the government aims to ensure holistic development of the nation. The corridors should further assist in integrating, monitoring and developing a conducive environment for industrial development and will promote advanced practices in manufacturing. So, all these things are very important and they are giving us, showing us the way to develop our industries and become industrially developed countries, and without the role of private capital these developments are not even possible in this age. So, the question that comes at the end of this section is how much FDI is allowed in defense manufacturing under automatic route after 2020. Thank you.